My name is Larry Bishop. I'm the operations manager here at Dig Safely New York. This afternoon we are meeting with our field representatives to identify ways that we want to promote underground damage prevention and reduce underground damages during 2005. Each one of us have got a significant part in this program, and we would like to go around our table and introduce ourselves and talk about the 5 major steps of the Dig Safely program. We feel the Dig Safely program is the core that excavators should know about in order to participate and eliminate underground damages. We also offer field presentations and a variety of handout items, but we now think it's time that we change excavators' behaviors and start doing those things in the field that we've all talked and read about.
I'm Michelle Alberico. I cover the central New York and southern tier portions of the state. The action item I'd like to speak with you about today is Call Before You Dig. New York State Code Rule 753 requires that anyone who engages in a trade or business, which includes the carrying out of excavation or demolition, notify all owners of buried facilities within the excavation area. Excavators are required to contact Dig Safely New York at least 2, but no more than 10 working days prior to the excavation or demolition, except in emergency situations. Dig Safely New York also offers an alternative way of placing location requests. It's called iNotice. In case you're one of the few excavators or member facility operators that have never heard of iNotice, it's the internet method of entering a location request. iNotice satisfies all the same requirements as calling the One Call Center for a location request. The iNotice program offers additional benefits that you don't receive when calling in a location request, such as no hold times, the elimination of verbal transcription errors, a hard copy of the location request, along with a list of the affected member facility operators. In addition, the iNotice program offers telephone numbers for each of the facility operators so that you can contact them directly with any questions or problems. What do you need to get started? High-speed internet access, an email account, a Dig Safely New York assigned username and password, Microsoft Internet Explorer 4.0 or newer, and a willingness to learn something new and different. It's also recommended that an average of 6 to 10 location requests be entered weekly. Remember, always call before you dig.
I'm John Kane, Western New York field rep for Dig Safely New York. And the action item I would like to discuss with you today is wait the required time. Once your request is in, the utilities have to have some time to get out there and mark their facilities before you start your excavation. That is a 2-day window. So if you call today, you must wait tomorrow and the next day before your excavation can commence.
Hello, I'm Donna Shea, field representative for the eastern part of New York State. I'd like to talk a little bit about the third step to a safe excavation, which is to confirm the utility responses. Under the Code Rule 753, all the utility companies that are listed on your ticket, on your locate request, all those companies, each and every one of them has to respond to your dig request. They either have to respond and tell you that you're clear and good to go because they don't have any utilities in that area, or they'll actually physically mark out the locate.
Hi, I'm John Yale, the Hudson Valley Field Representative for Dig Safely New York. I come to you today to talk about respecting the marks and dig with care. Action item number 4, respecting the marks. After you've made your telephone call and after you've gotten your responses back from the utility companies, it's very important that those marks that are on the ground at the location where you want to excavate are respected. You have requirements according to the New York State law to dig by hand and locate those facilities. Another way you could find those facilities is to use vacuum excavation. Vacuum excavation is a new technology, and it's just as good as hand digging. Your excavation site is the area where you are working, and these marks are very vital to having a safe excavation for your area. You do have a requirement at the end to remove those marks when your site work is completed. One other item I'd like to touch on today is your format pad. Your format pad can be obtained from Dig Safely New York, any field rep in New York State, or you can find it on Dig Safely New York's website. It's very helpful and very vital for having all the information you need when you call before you dig.
Our damage prevention councils, DPCs, furnish an opportunity to build a strong grassroots presence within stakeholder groups within a 5 to 7 county area. These groups meet regularly to promote underground damage prevention activities and events. They establish a network between stakeholder groups to resolve roadblocks to promote the 4 C's: coordination, communications, cooperation, and close the loop. Excavators, facility operators, PSC staff, equipment vendors, and Dig Safely employees are in attendance at the monthly meetings. The volunteer DPCs are the heart and activity of education and outreach and marketing programs for underground damage prevention. We encourage you to check out our website for the DPC meetings scheduled in your area. The video you are about to see shows some of the horrors of underground damage accidents. Please change your behavior and observe the 5 steps that we have been discussing this afternoon. You certainly do not want to be part of next year's feature in the Digging Dangers video series. Thank you.
The accidents you will see in this video nearly all happened over a 12-month period. There is a great deal to be learned by seeing what is happening to others. The most important being how to keep the same things from happening to you. Here is one of the worst accidents of the year. 5 workers died when a track hoe being used on a water line installation punched a hole in a pipeline carrying high-octane jet fuel. The fuel sprayed over the job site where the workers were welding joints on a 5-foot diameter steel water line. Fuel flowed into a trench where the welding crew was working. Keep in mind that the video footage you are now seeing was taken well after the initial explosion and fire. The flames had subsided by this time. Immediately after the explosion, the fire was so intense that it destroyed a nearby home and damaged 2 others. Heat from the fire could be felt blocks away. Residual fuel continued to flare up around the site and inside the water line where some of the welders had been working. Repair crews and emergency responders could do nothing but wait. It was too risky for them to enter the site with fuel randomly igniting, even though at least 2 bodies were clearly visible from some distance away. The last of the bodies was retrieved from inside the water line 2 days later. Initial reports say the pipeline's presence was known, and the water line installation job had been paralleling it for nearly 2 miles. The reports indicate that at the point of impact, the line may have jogged into the path of the digging, or the digging veered toward the pipeline. A safety consultant was quoted by the news media as saying, "Excavation should never take place that close to a line unless the line location has been determined to the inch." He is probably the same type of expert that will be called upon to testify in the lawsuits that are bound to result from this tragedy. And this was not the worst tragedy of the past year. 24 people died in a pipeline explosion in Gilongia, Belgium. This explosion resulted from damage inflicted by a backhoe at a building construction site. People died both in the explosion and afterwards from burns, with the death toll eventually reaching 24. Some 100 people were injured. The explosion occurred 1.5 hours after the hit, as repair workers were trying to seal the leak. When gas escaping from the 3-foot transmission line ignited, it sent bodies and cars flying through the air. Some of the dead were workers in a nearby diamond cutting factory who had arrived at work after the line was damaged. Authorities have been extensively criticized for not immediately evacuating the area when the backhoe hit the pipe. This pipeline explosion may have been bigger than the one in Belgium, but it did virtually no damage. It happened in the middle of an Iowa farm field. flames shot several hundred feet into the air, and the roar of the escaping gas could be heard for a mile. After the gas had burned out, a 30 by 15-foot crater marked the spot of the explosion. Reports were sketchy, but apparently there was some excavation going on at the site, and there is a history of open field pipeline hits during installation of field drainage tile. A new development over the past year has been a surge of fiber optic cable installations as providers rush to be the first to offer movies on demand, faster internet access, and other new services. The impact on lines that are already in the ground is predictable. In one example, a crew using a directional drilling rig to install fiber optic cable struck a 2-inch gas line. The escaping gas flowed through a sewer line, which also may have been damaged by the bore, and into this home where it ignited. The blast sent the roof high into the air, and it landed on the house next door. Both were destroyed, but luckily, no one was home at the time. Florida communities have suffered a rash of utility damages by cable installers. This incident involved a hit on a sewer line. An unsuspecting motorist stopped at an intersection suddenly felt her car list as the pavement gave way beneath it. The cable installation crew apparently didn't even know they had hit the sewer pipe. Over time, the leaking sewage washed out a sinkhole beneath the pavement. While not a bad accident, it was the last straw for local officials who had been barraged by public complaints and adverse news coverage that used a hurricane reference in labeling the cable project as a Category 5. Cable installations were shut down throughout the area, and some 2,000 workers were idled while the phone company implemented additional damage prevention measures and looked for some new contractors. Although damages during fiber optic cable installations are on the rise, damages caused by other types of excavation remain all too common. This water line hit occurred during installation of new water and sewer lines. A contractor working for the city did the damage. It was not explained why he didn't know the location of the existing water line, which was also owned by the city. However, contractors in such cases often face difficult challenges. Utility records and mapping are notoriously deficient in cities throughout the nation. In smaller communities particularly, workers who install the utilities are counted upon to know where the lines are. That works only until these workers retire, or if a key person happens to be off sick or on vacation at the time the information is needed. This problem is gradually being addressed as contractors demand better records before digging in public rights of way. Pressure from the public and from business owners affected by outages is also helping. Augering or drilling to cross beneath a road is a risky business, since you are almost certain to have to cross gas mains and other underground lines in the right-of-way or in the roadbed itself. In this accident, a worker was hospitalized when the auger he was using to install a water main beneath the road hit a 4-inch gas main. The gas erupted from the borehole and ignited in the pit where the victim was operating the boring machine. He suffered severe burns but survived. Fire officials said the line had been marked. This home was destroyed and 5 people injured when gas exploded and caused a fire. Tragedy was averted when a heroic neighbor pulled a man and an invalid woman from the flames. He was injured himself in the process. Reports indicate a gas line had been damaged by an excavator. 2 firefighters nearly lost their lives after responding to a hit on a gas line by a construction crew. A fire captain entered this trench and was overcome by gas. A second firefighter came to his rescue and was affected to a lesser extent. The captain required mouth-to-mouth resuscitation and oxygen to regain consciousness. Reports did not say why the firefighters went into the trench without gas masks. A possible explanation is that the gas may not have had an odor. Sometimes, when gas flows through dirt, the odorizer used to make the gas detectable can be filtered out. A construction crew working on a street rebuilding project damaged a 4-inch gas main. firefighters were called to the scene immediately after the hit and were able to keep the flames from damaging nearby buildings. Authorities said the line had been clearly marked. We don't know exactly why this particular crew apparently disregarded the marks, but these types of accidents often occur when backhoe operators try to remove dirt from around marked lines with their machines rather than hand digging. In this accident, a crew working on a street rebuilding project struck a gas main, then did something right. As the gas started leaking, they immediately called 911. Firefighters arriving on the scene had time to hook up their hoses and evacuate the area before the escaping gas ignited. Windows were blown out of some houses by the explosion, and several had charring on the sides facing the flames, but they didn't get a chance to catch fire because the hoses were aimed and ready when the gas ignited. This is what can happen when a backhoe hits a 20-inch gas main. In this case, the backhoe was being used by a water department crew. The workers had time to get away before the gas ignited. They were lucky, especially the operator of this backhoe. The flames are shooting several hundred feet into the air and could be seen for 30 miles. They are right next to a 17-story apartment building. The wind aided the firefighters by blowing the flames away from the building and into a park. This water department truck was just too close to the brake for the wind to do any good. Another truck was also destroyed. The news chopper that shot this footage also had a narrow escape. The pilot had apparently picked up a transmission on his police scanner that said a construction accident was causing a traffic jam. That accident happened to be this gas main hit. As the chopper was flying over and filming the scene, the gas ignited. Seeing flames suddenly billowing up beneath them must have been quite an experience for the pilot and cameraman. They probably had to change their underwear after that. Another factor made this accident a near catastrophe. A couple of hours before the explosion, this street was lined with school buses filled with students from nearby schools. Again, 911 had been called when the gas first started leaking. Firefighters had time to close off the street, evacuate the area, and keep water flowing onto nearby buildings. Before this was all over, 60 pieces of equipment and 130 firefighters were on the scene. Initial reports indicate the underground lines at the site were marked, but an abandoned line may have been confused with a live line. In this case, 911 was not called when a water department crew broke a gas line. They called the gas company instead. 2 elderly women died in this accident. One of the women died in the explosion, and the other died later in the hospital. A fire department report says that on the morning of the explosion, city water department employees went to the home to replace a water meter. They mistook a steel line for the home's water service and turned off a shutoff valve that was on the line. However, it was not a water pipe. It was an old gas line with a newer plastic pipe installed inside it. Turning the valve fractured the plastic pipe. The steel pipe had been cut off about 2 feet from the home's foundation. The fire department report says that when the plastic pipe fractured, the pressure of the escaping gas forced it out of the end of the old metal pipe. At least some of the gas migrated through dirt to the house and through a crack in the home's concrete block foundation. When the water crew smelled gas, they called the gas company. The gas crew called to the scene, repaired the fractured line, but didn't know about the gas buildup in the basement. 4 hours after the pipe was first broken, a gas company employee sent to relight the pilot light on a water heater struck a match, setting off the explosion. It is very unlikely that an experienced gas company worker would have struck a match if he smelled gas. This was apparently another case where gas passing through dirt was stripped of its odorant. The house was lifted off its foundation and shredded by the blast. Neighbors pulled 4 people from the rubble, including the gas worker, who was hospitalized with severe burns on his face and arms. So we have 2 people dead in Evansville, Indiana, 5 dead in Walnut Creek, California, and 24 dead in Belgium. But numbers tell only part of the story. There's also the suffering and loss by the spouses, parents, daughters, and sons of the victims. Peter Roy can relate to that. His mother was one of 7 people killed in a 2003 accident in a Toronto suburb. A backhoe struck a gas service line to a strip mall containing a beauty shop where his mother was getting her hair done. Peter has a story to tell of the personal devastation that you don't see on the TV news. Giving up hope after seeing the rubble and his mother's smashed car in front of the demolished building, Peter, his sisters, and brother gathered at his father's house.
We all stayed up at my dad's house with him, and the next day was sprinkled with phone calls because they were a couple of days getting through all the wreckage. But we also knew, you know, and Dr. Cairns, the coroner, calls and wants the name and telephone number of the dentist. We all know what that's about, and that's the reality of the situation. And the dentist was quite shocked because he'd sort of known the family for a long time as well. The effects are rippling.
Peter's story is also that of an engineer who was launched into a quest for answers. He has strong motivation.
It keeps coming back to, can't change it, I cannot bring my mother back. Something good must come of this. My mother would want me to get to the bottom of it and prevent it from happening to somebody else. Just the fact that it won't bring my mother back, and it's not going to do actually anything for me to be successful in these pursuits that I'm doing. I've got to do it for somebody else's sake, and that's what my mother would be proud of and what my mother would expect of me. The biggest things I learned initially in the days following was that this was a nature of installation which had a gas line underground from the main, supplying a meter regulator assembly which is inside the building, in the basement of the building. And in this circumstance, the regulator is inside the building, so the pressure into the structure was a mid-pressure line, which is nominally 35 psi in Ontario. And it is quite simply obvious that when the backhoe pulled the line, it pulled the meter up against the block wall and broke the line. I think it's just not rocket science that a 35 psi line blowing open into the basement of this building very quickly filled the building with gas and ignited. I'm quite frustrated that these systems are even able to exist like this. I think it's totally unreasonable that you would have 10,000 amps of electricity coming into the basement of your house without a fuse for a protected device outside the house. I think this is a very similar parallel, that a gas line like this can deliver hundreds of times what it might otherwise deliver to the appliances under load in a fault condition. And I think this really needs to be more of an issue made of this, that this was the primary factor, or primary cause in this explosion, or the severity of this explosion.
Peter's research turned up excess flow valves, and he believes that such a valve on the service line to that mall would have served as a fuse and automatically shut off the gas well before it reached an explosive concentration in the basement. Excess flow valves are not widely used in Canada, but the Firefighters Union, acting on information Peter gathered, is now lobbying for their expanded use.
In further research into natural gas leaks, I've come to the conclusion myself that these incidents and leaks happen a great deal more often than the general public is aware of. In the words of a Toronto fire captain I spoke to, across the Greater Toronto area, gas line hits and leaks occur approximately once per day. I'm encouraged by the fact that I seem to have uncovered this issue and brought it to light in Canada for the firefighters, because I felt that once they understood what I was talking about and reviewed my information, they were really quite surprised that something so simple existed to prevent these kinds of accidents.
Peter's thoughts go out to the excavator in the cab of the backhoe that day. The line had not been marked, but that's probably little consolation.
He's got to wake up in the morning and think about that day that he hit a line and killed 7 people. I don't know if he might even wonder if he would have preferred to go with him, because he's just, you know, he's just in the excavator doing what he does, and that day changed his life forever. I can't even think that his burden is probably larger than mine. This is a prayer card from my mother's funeral. Accidents happen, and you guys out there doing the digging, please remember this so that doesn't happen to you. I can't bring my mother back. I'm certain she would be proud if I could prevent something like this from happening again. You question fate and all the coincidences that line up to have my mother present in that building plus or minus 45 minutes and say, was this supposed to happen to prevent something larger from happening? We've got to learn from this. This cannot go without changes. We have identified some problems, we need changes, we need improvement.